The storm had been hammering the valley since dawn, a relentless downpour that flattened grass and sent the forest into a shivering haze. Oren had wandered farther than he meant to, scouting the ridge in hopes of finding fresh tracks before the rains washed everything clean. He was about to turn back when a faint cry cut through the patter of rain. Oren froze. It wasn't a bird call or the whine of wind between the stones. It was thin, brittle, almost broken, like a creature too weak to make a proper sound. He followed it down a narrow ravine, brushing aside dripping branches until he spotted a small shape huddled beneath a slab of rock. A Sabarak kitten. It lay curled tight, its body trembling in uneven shivers. Its fur was soaked through, clinging to a frame far too thin, each rib showed plainly beneath the sodden coat. Its eyes blinked slowly, unfocused. The creature's breaths came shallow and slow, as if every one cost more strength than it had left. It wasn't wounded. It was starving. And the cold rain was finishing what hunger had started. The kitten tried to lift its head as Oren approached, but its neck wobbled and fell back to the stone. A faint rasp escaped its throat, a sound far too fragile for something that would one day grow into a feared hunter of the plains. Oren felt the weight of the moment settle on him. His father taught him that Sabaraks were not to be approached, not even the young. But no lesson prepared him for the sight of a creature fading in front of him, too weak to defend itself, too small to endure a night in the storm. "You're freezing," he whispered. He slipped his fur covering from his shoulders, moving slowly so he wouldn't startle it. The kitten's muscles tensed for a heartbeat, then relaxed, more from exhaustion than trust. Its body felt chilled to the bone when he wrapped it gently in the cloak. It seemed far too light for its size. Oren cradled it close, shielding it from the wind, and scanned the tree line for any sign of its mother. But the slope was empty. The storm had swept away tracks, scents, everything. Whatever had happened to its family, the kitten was alone. Oren turned toward the village but hesitated. He couldn't take it home. The elders would demand he leave it to the cold. Even his own family would refuse to house a Sabarak, no matter how small. But there was one place he could hide it. The luck, the old storage shelter near the back of his family's land. Hardly anyone went inside anymore. It leaned and creaked and smelled of damp straw, but it was dry, and more importantly, private. Oren hurried through the rain, boots splashing through muddy pools, keeping the kitten tucked close against his chest. The creature's shivers weakened with every step. He pushed open the Thaluk's warped wooden door, and the scent of old hides and wet timber drifted outward. Inside, the dimness felt like safety. He knelt and laid the tiny body on a folded pelt. The kitten's eyes fluttered, barely able to stay open. Oren wrapped it again in his cloak and lit a small fire, warming the space as best he could. The glow revealed the fragile rise and fall of its chest. "Please don't die, little one," Oren whispered. "I'm here." The kitten looked up at him weakly for a moment before resting its head again, eyes closed, purring. Outside, the storm roared across the valley. Inside the luck, the boy kept vigil beside a creature that should have been his enemy, determined to give it a chance at life. The morning after the storm, the valley glistened under a pale, weak sun. Having gone home, Oren had slept only a little, worried as he was about the kitten. When he woke, he hurriedly returned to the luck. Sitting beside the tiny Sabarak wrapped in his furs, he lifted the bundle. The kitten stirred, weakly stretching its limbs, trembling from the cold but alive. Oren's worry lifted. The creature had survived the night. He fed it small scraps of meat he had saved from his breakfast, chunks of dried meat softened with water. The kitten sniffed cautiously, its golden eyes still wide with fear, and ate slowly. Each bite seemed to bring color back to its fur, and Oren felt a spark of hope. "You're going to be okay," he whispered, brushing wet strands of fur from its small head. "You just need warmth and food." He didn't know if the creature could understand him. It might be too young to even recognize his voice, yet it nudged his hand with its head, a fragile gesture that made him smile despite the worry gnawing at his chest. His parents were beginning their morning chores, and he knew that even now, if anyone saw him carrying the kitten, questions would follow. His parents would not approve. Sabaraks were dangerous. Even kittens could grow fast, sharp, and deadly. For now though, the luck was as safe a place as he could find. Its walls leaned and sagged, the roof patched with bark and sod, but it was warm enough to provide shelter. Oren arranged furs around the kitten and built a small frame with twigs to protect it from drafts. The kitten curled into the makeshift nest, shivering less as the warmth seeped through. Oren settled beside it, watching the rise and fall of its tiny chest. Hours passed in silence, broken only by the kitten's soft, rasping breaths and the distant rumble of another storm approaching. He began to notice its subtle movements, the way it flexed its small claws, the flick of its tail when he shifted closer, the tentative sniffing of its surroundings. Even weak and malnourished, the creature carried the instincts of a predator, coiled in the tiniest muscles of its tiny body. As the day wore on, Oren fed it more scraps, letting it rest between bites. He murmured to it stories of the forest, of the hunts he had watched, of the mountains beyond the village. Whether the kitten understood the words or not, it listened, eyes weary, ears twitching. Outside, the rain had begun to fall again, the soft susurration of it, lulling the kitten to sleep again. Oren murmured to the kitten sweetly, petting it lovingly and making sure it stayed warm. The kitten's contented purring was loud and raspy in the quiet of the luck. Oren knew the truth, he could not keep it hidden forever. It would grow stronger, larger. His family would notice, and the village would eventually hear. But for now, he had bought it a little time, a chance to survive the storm and hunger. Later, as the afternoon sun fought through the clouds, Oren whispered again, "I'll keep you safe, little one. I promise." Days passed in quiet routine. The storm had gone, leaving the valley washed clean, with mist clinging to the trees and dew glimmering on the grass. In the luck, Oren spent each hour beside the Sabarak, whose small body had begun to fill out with strength and warmth. The kitten, once frail and trembling, now moved with more purpose. It stretched its legs, swiped at twigs, and tried to pounce on small scraps Oren held before it. Its golden eyes were bright, alert, and full of curiosity. Oren had begun to see glimpses of the predator it would one day become, coiled in those tiny muscles and sharp claws. "Not too fast," Oren said, laughing softly as the kitten leapt and missed the scrap. "You're still small. You need patience." But patience was not a trait of the Sabarak. The creature was bold and quick, its instincts guiding it even at this young age. It crouched, it pounced, and it explored the luck with a mixture of wariness and excitement. Oren watched carefully, learning its rhythms, its likes and dislikes, the twitch of its ears at different sounds, the way it responded to his voice. As time passed, Oren's family began to notice small changes. Extra meat disappeared from the hearth. Oren would go missing more often, and return dirty, his clothes damp and smelling strange. None of them knew yet what he had found in the rain, but something was clearly occupying his time and attention. Oren, meanwhile, was already teaching the kitten the smallest lessons: how to balance, how to pounce on moving leaves, how to stalk without making a sound. He called the creature Shard, for the tiny white streak on its head that caught the light like a sliver of moon. "Good, Shard," he murmured as the kitten lunged at a twig and caught it mid-air. "You're learning." At night, Oren brought the creature closer to his chest, letting its small body press against him for warmth. Sometimes he imagined what it would be like when Shard grew larger, faster, stronger. A predator that others would fear. The thought made his chest tighten, but he pushed it away. For now, Shard was still a kitten, and he was alive. The first hints of worry came sooner than Oren was ready for. Oren's mother quietly followed him to the luck one evening, peering through the wood. She saw movement, tiny, agile, golden fur, but said nothing. His father often had missing furs, but Oren offered simple excuses: blaming stray animals that must have wandered through and made off with them. Still, their gazes on him lingered longer than usual. Whispers passed in the kitchen when Oren was not around. His mother kept his secret, though her concern grew. She knew she would soon have to tell his father what Oren was hiding. Protecting. Inside the luck, Oren didn't notice that his mother knew his secret. He was entirely focused on Shard. The kitten had begun to play with the shadows on the wall, chasing flickering light from the fire. It would leap and pounce, swipe with tiny claws, and then eventually collapse in exhaustion. Oren laughed, brushing the fur from its eyes. "You'll be a mighty hunter one day," he said. Outside, the valley lay quiet, mist curling between trees. Shadows of clouds stretched across the ground. Inside the luck, a boy and a growing Sabarak kitten shared their secret, bound by warmth and the slow forging of trust. Days bled into weeks. The valley had settled into a rhythm after the storm. Sunlight warmed the grass, mist curled in the mornings, and the forest thrummed with life. Inside the luck, Oren and Shard had established their own quiet world. The Sabarak kitten was growing fast. Its small muscles had hardened, its claws were sharper, and its once fragile leaps now carried precision. Shard would stalk through the pile of furs, pounce on leaves, or chase the flicker of shadows along the walls. Oren marveled at each movement, knowing that the creature's instincts were already fierce. "You're getting quick," Oren murmured, crouching to the ground as Shard played with his own tail. "But don't get too wild, not yet." Food had become the biggest challenge. The kitten needed more than scraps, and Oren had to be clever to provide. He hunted for Shard now, sneaking game to him brought down in the nearby mountain forest, or eggs foraged along its outskirts. Each trip was a risk. He could not let anyone see him carrying the hidden meals. Even with care, the family began to notice his activities. Oren's mother watched him one morning as he returned from the forest, hands wet and muddy, his cloak smelling of blood and damp earth. "Oren, you've been gone longer than usual," she said, eyes narrowing, but she did not press further. Something in her tone suggested he was keeping secrets. "Learning my hunting, Ma. Guess I'm not good at it. So I need the practice." He gave her a wistful smile that she simply dismissed with a "So you say." Inside the luck, Shard was testing his limits. He began exploring farther when Oren was not around, slipping between rafters escaping into the surrounding area. But he stayed close to the luck, knowing it was his home. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the misty peaks, Oren realized how different Shard had become. The small Sabarak had grown taller, muscles coiled and ready beneath its golden coat. The eyes that once blinked weakly now gleamed with intelligence and awareness. "You're growing so much," Oren whispered. "You're learning, hunting, watching." Oren and a growing Sabarak grew together as the months passed, unaware of how close the world outside was to discovering their fragile, precious secret. Shard was growing fast. Every morning, Oren found the not-so-little Sabarak testing his limits, more aware of the outside world around him. Oren's mother had been quietly helping for weeks, unseen and careful. She gave Oren extra food scraps, but never interfered directly. She trusted Oren to his secret. For now. One morning, Oren carried Shard to the edge of the forest for a brief practice in hunting small birds and insects. When he and Shard returned, Oren's mother, father and older brother were at the luck, their faces covered in shock at the large cat following Oren. Oren froze. Shard crouched low behind him, ears flat, tail twitching. His mother stepped forward calmly, placing a hand on his shoulder. "It is time." His father had finally caught on to Oren's subterfuge. So she told the family what she already knew, that Oren had rescued and was taking care of a baby Sabarak. Her voice carried authority, and the others listened, though unease lingered in their eyes. "It must not be seen by the village," his father said. "It is growing, yes, but if they knew, it would be killed, or worse." You should return it to the wild. He will, soon, she said, fixing Oren with a knowing glare. But not yet. The creature still is not ready to fend for itself. The family argued in whispers, uneasy and uncertain, but ultimately agreed. Oren's father grunted reluctantly, warning about the danger the Sabarak could bring, but allowed the kitten to remain. They would help keep it hidden, though their unease never fully faded. Oren exhaled, relief washing over him. Shard, sensing the tension eased, nudged against his hand, for comfort. That evening, as the sun set behind the peaks, Oren's mother stayed with him in the luck, arranging furs and handing Shard small meat scraps. You're not alone in this, she whispered to Oren. But you must be careful. Every day, the risk grows. Oren looked at Shard sadly. He knew the day would soon come when he must let go of Shard. For now, neither he nor Shard were ready for that. The sun was just rising over the misty peaks when Oren stepped out of the luck. The air smelled of damp earth and pine, and the forest was alive with movement, birds flitting through the branches, small animals scurrying through the underbrush. Shard padded beside him, tall and muscular now, his golden fur sleek and shining in the morning light. Oren had spent weeks guiding the Sabarak, teaching him how to stalk, pounce, and watch the subtle movements of prey. Now, he felt a new weight of responsibility. Shard was strong enough, Oren thought, to begin hunting on his own, but the risk was immense. You're ready, Oren murmured, kneeling to brush a loose twig from Shard's fur. I trust you to fend for yourself now. Shard crouched, muscles coiled, tail flicking. With a sudden burst, he melted into the undergrowth, moving like a shadow among the trees. Oren watched, heart hammering, as the young Sabarak vanished from sight. Minutes passed. Then the faintest rustle, a flash of golden fur. Oren grinned. Shard had caught a rabbit, holding it in his jaws with gentle care, not breaking it, just proving he could. The Sabarak looked up, meeting Oren's eyes for a brief moment, and then vanished again into the forest. For the first time, Oren realized the bond between them was not one of control, but of trust. Shard was learning, growing, becoming his own hunter, and Oren had to let him live his life. Months passed. Shard returned sporadically, sometimes bringing his catch to Oren, sometimes simply brushing past him before bounding back into the trees. Each time, Oren felt a thrill of pride, and a shiver of worry. The forest was wide, full of dangers, larger predators, sudden storms, or villagers who might wander too close. Yet, each time, Shard returned. The young Sabarak was learning to hunt for himself and gain independence more and more. Spring had settled deep into the valley. The forest was alive with movement, birds flitted through the trees, small animals darted through the underbrush, and sunlight dappled the earth in shifting patterns. Shard had grown into a powerful Sabarak, muscles sleek and golden fur gleaming in the morning light. Oren watched from the edge of the clearing. The young Sabarak padded silently among the trees, eyes sharp, instincts keen. Today, he would roam farther than ever, hunting entirely on his own. Oren felt pride and a pang of worry in equal measure. Be careful, Oren whispered, brushing a loose strand of fur from Shard's eyes. But I trust you. Shard crouched, muscles coiled, and with a sudden burst of speed, vanished into the forest. Oren waited, heart pounding, listening to the soft rustle of leaves, the snap of twigs beneath paws. Hours passed. When Shard returned, it was brief. He brought a small hare, dropped it at Oren's feet, and padded back into the trees before the boy could speak. Each day, the intervals grew longer. Shard spent more time in the forest, hunting, exploring, learning the ways of the wild. The luck no longer felt like his home, it was a place to rest, a brief refuge before returning to the life that belonged to him. Oren's mother, father, and older brother watched quietly, helping maintain the secret, supplying scraps and guidance when needed, but allowing Oren and Shard the freedom they now required. They understood that the Sabarak's growth meant independence, and that Oren's childhood was drawing to a close. One evening, as the sun sank behind the peaks, Oren sat on the furs inside the luck, brushing the remnants of fur left from Shard's last visit. He realized that the small, hungry kitten he had rescued in the storm was gone. In its place was a hunter, choosing his own path in the forest. A weight settled in Oren's chest. Pride, yes, but also longing. The companionship that had defined his childhood was slipping away. He whispered softly to the empty space beside him, "I'll never forget you, my friend." Outside, the forest whispered with life. Inside, Oren felt the first stirrings of something new. The world was larger now, more uncertain, and he, too, was beginning to step into it. His childhood, full of laughter, trust, and golden fur curled beside him, was ending. Shard eventually disappeared, and Oren, holding on to the memories of their bond, grew up with the lessons of trust, independence, and the bittersweet beauty of letting go. The valley was alive with the first light of dawn, mist curling over the peaks and streams glinting like silver ribbons. Oren, now a tall, broad-shouldered man, adjusted the straps of his hunting gear and checked the sharpened points of his spear. His hair, once messy and boyish, was now thick and dark as his beard, and his hands bore the calluses of decades spent in the forest. He had his own place now, a small but sturdy home near the edge of the village. Smoke rose from the hearth, and the laughter of his children drifted across the clearing. His wife bustled about, preparing food and offering him a warm smile before he left. "Stay safe," she said, pressing a hand to his shoulder. "And bring back something good for the children." Oren nodded, a grin tugging at his lips. "Always." He joined the other hunters, men he had grown up with, now hardened and skilled. Together, they moved silently into the forest, tracking signs of deer, elk, and smaller game. Oren's senses were sharp, every rustle, every scent, every shadow told a story. The forest was no longer a place of lessons and playful exploration, it was life and survival. As he moved, memories surfaced of a golden-furred companion, a creature who had once curled beside him in the luck, teaching him trust, patience, and the thrill of the hunt. Shard, the Sabarak, had vanished into the wild years ago, leaving only those memories and the lessons of independence. Oren smiled faintly at the thought. The boy who had rescued the small, starving creature had grown into the man who now led hunters into the forest. The forest was quiet in a way that made Oren's skin prickle. He led the hunting party deeper into the mist-draped woods, spear in hand, ears straining for the subtle sounds of deer or elk. The men followed closely, their movements careful and practiced, yet even their experience could not shake the uneasy tension that seemed to pulse through the trees. Birds had fallen silent. Small creatures that usually darted through the underbrush had vanished. Only the whisper of the wind through the branches remained, carrying with it a strange, unfamiliar scent. Oren paused, crouching low, eyes scanning the darkening woods. "Tracks," he murmured, kneeling to examine them. The footprints were human, but much larger than normal. They led deeper into the forest, weaving through thick undergrowth, vanishing and reappearing in unsettling patterns. One of the younger hunters frowned. "I've never seen tracks like that," he said quietly. "Whoever made them must be huge." Oren motioned for silence. "Stay alert." The men moved forward with caution. Every rustle, snap of a branch, and glint of shadow set nerves on edge. Oren's hand tightened on his spear, instincts from decades of hunting sharpening his senses. He had faced dangerous animals before, but the forest felt different today. The air was heavier, the shadows darker, and something unseen seemed to be watching. As they pushed through a dense copse, a guttural growl echoed between the trees. The men froze. Oren's eyes darted to the source, a huge shadow that flickered behind the trunks, too covered to be seen clearly. "Stay together," he ordered. "Move slowly. Whatever it is, it's aware of us." For hours, the party moved through the forest. The usual rhythm of hunting was gone, replaced by a tense silence. Every crack of a twig, every rustle of leaves, made the men jump, and Oren felt a knot of unease growing in his stomach. By late afternoon, the party had reached a clearing. Oren scanned the edges of the trees. Something moved, a flash of darkness, and then nothing. The sense of being watched had grown unbearable. Oren exhaled slowly, whispering to himself, "This forest hides more than deer and elk, and I think we're being surrounded." The hunters tightened their formation, and a tension unlike any the men had felt before began to coil around them like a living thing. The forest had grown darker as the day waned, shadows stretching long across the underbrush. Oren led the hunting party with measured steps, spear in hand, senses straining. Every rustle and snap of twigs felt amplified, and the uneasy feeling that had been creeping through the woods all day now pressed heavily on his chest. Suddenly, a guttural scream tore through the trees, a sound not made by any animal Oren had ever heard. The men froze, hearts pounding. Oren's eyes darted toward the source, but the shadows between the trunks seemed to shift, hiding whatever had made it. "Get ready," he muttered, voice low but urgent. From the shadows, massive figures emerged. They were human-like, but far taller and broader than any man in the party. Muscles rippled beneath thick hides, and heavy brow ridges cast deep shadows over keen, calculating eyes. These were crone, far larger than any ordinary hunter, and they carried crude but deadly weapons, heavy clubs, stone axes, and jagged spears. The hunters tensed. Oren could see immediately why the village legends called them beast men. They were human, but their size and strength made them terrifying predators. Without warning, they charged. The ground seemed to tremble under their weight as they closed in, swinging massive clubs with deadly precision. Oren met the first blow with his spear, thrusting upward to deflect the swing, but the sheer size of the crone nearly knocked him off his feet. "Stay together!" Oren shouted, heart hammering. He moved among the men, blocking, parrying, and urging them to retreat into the cover of the trees. One of the younger hunters froze in fear, and a crone grabbed him, shaking him like a ragdoll. Oren lunged, driving his spear into the attacker's side, forcing him to release the boy. The forest erupted in chaos. Each crone seemed stronger than any man could hope to fight alone. Oren realized quickly that brute force would not win this day. They had to use speed, skill, and strategy, moving with the cover of the trees to avoid direct blows. Spear met club again and again. Men ducked, rolled, and scrambled, barely keeping ahead of the giants. The air rang with grunts, shouts, and the crack of wood striking bone and stone. Oren's chest heaved, muscles straining, mind racing to keep the party alive. The men fought bravely, but it was clear quickly, they were outmatched. Each crone could crush a man with a single blow, and there were more of them than the hunters could handle in close combat. "Fall back," Oren shouted. "Follow me." The party scattered into the trees, moving as fast as they could, hearts pounding, legs burning. The crone chased them, but the men were faster, more nimble, dodging between trees deeper into the forest and out of immediate danger. Breathing hard, Oren regrouped the men behind a thicket, scanning the darkening forest. "We can't fight them head-on," he said grimly. "We need a plan. If we stay exposed, we'll die." The hunters exchanged nervous glances, understanding the gravity of the encounter. The forest, once a place of game and survival, had transformed into a hunting ground where the rules had changed, and human strength alone was no longer enough to ensure safety. Oren tightened his grip on his spear, eyes narrowing into the shadows. Somewhere out there, the crone were coming, and the forest had become a battlefield in a game the hunters had only just begun to understand. The forest had become a maze of shadows and gnarled trees as the hunters pressed deeper, trying to escape the relentless pursuit. Oren led the group, heart pounding, scanning for any signs of shelter or advantage, but the crone were relentless, towering, powerful, and cunning. The hunters pushed through a narrow clearing, only to find themselves hemmed in on all sides. Massive Kruln emerged from the forest, cutting off every possible route of escape. Their heavy clubs, and obsidian axes and spears gleamed in the dim light, eyes glinting with anticipation. Oren's breath caught. There was no way through without a fight, and he knew it was hopeless. Oren gritted his teeth. The Kruln stepped closer, cracking their clubs against trees, hooting and growling with the anticipation of the kill. The hunters backed up, pressed against the walls of the arroyo, every instinct screaming danger. Oren tightened his grip on his spear, ready to defend, but he knew that strength alone would not save them. Then, from the shadows beyond the clearing, a low growl rolled through the forest. The hunters froze. Out of the dense trees, a golden shape appeared, muscles rippling, eyes bright, teeth bared. A Sabarak. With terrifying speed and precision, the Sabarak leapt upon the Kruln. Claws slashed, teeth snapped, and a roar of fury echoed through the clearing. The massive Kruln staggered back, caught off guard by the ferocity of the monstrous cat. Oren's heart leapt. The hunters could only watch as the Sabarak struck again and again, moving through the Kruln like a force of nature. It lunged with a savage roar, teeth sinking into flesh, claws raking through muscle. The Kruln staggered under the sudden, brutal attack and scattered. The hunters' backs were pressed against the rock walls, hearts pounding. The Kruln had been scattered moments, many torn apart by the massive Sabarak, but the danger was not over. Every man froze as the creature paused, muscles rippling, eyes burning like coals, surveying them. The hunters could not move. They did not dare. Every instinct screamed fear, and even the bravest gripped their spears tighter, knowing the Sabarak might turn on them next. The golden eyes of the Sabarak swept over the hunters. There was no aggression, no hunger, no threat, only recognition. Oren's eyes scanned the magnificent beast, heart pounding. And then, he saw it, the white mark on the forehead, a pattern he would never forget. His chest tightened, breath catching. "Shard," he whispered, voice barely audible. "Shard." He immediately threw down his spear and opened his arms to the massive beast. The other hunters remained frozen, looking at Oren as if he had lost his mind. The hunters huddled against the rock, hearts still racing. But Oren did not hesitate. He stepped forward, eyes locked on the creature he had raised so many years ago. Each step was measured, calm, and confident, though his heart pounded in his chest. The hunters gasped and exchanged terrified glances. "He's going to get eaten," one whispered. Another clutched his spear tightly, eyes wide in disbelief. Oren stopped just a few feet from Shard. For a moment, the forest seemed to hold its breath. The Sabarak's golden eyes studied him, muscles tensing, but there was no malice. Oren's gaze softened, and he spoke quietly. "Shard, oh, I've missed you so much." The Sabarak blinked, ears flicking, then lowered its massive head. And then, with a careful, gentle motion, it allowed Oren to step closer. Oren reached up, wrapping his arms around the broad, muscular neck of the creature. The Sabarak leaned into him, a deep rumble vibrating from its chest, and Oren laughed softly. "Thank you for saving us, my friend," he whispered as he tousled the fur behind one of its ears. The hunters could hardly believe their eyes. Oren, a man among men, was hugging a beast that could have torn them apart in a heartbeat, and the creature responded with affection, nuzzling and pawing him gently as if no time had passed. Shard's massive head lowered until his muzzle rested lightly against Oren's shoulder. The rumbling sound became a soft, playful growl as he nudged, licked, and pawed at Oren in a display of loving familiarity. Oren laughed again, holding tight, feeling the bond they had shared as children. The other hunters stayed rooted in place, their fear and awe mixing into silent astonishment. They whispered among themselves, eyes wide, unable to believe what they were seeing. One of them muttered, "What is happening?" Oren didn't care about the whispers or the fear around him. For the first time in years, he was reunited with his childhood companion, and nothing else mattered. The golden Sabarak, wild and untamed, had returned, and in that moment, they were simply old friends once more. The forest around them remained shadowed and tense, but for Oren, the world had narrowed to the warmth and life of the creature in his arms. The forest was quiet again, the golden rays of the sun filtering through the trees. Oren and Shard stood facing each other, the bond between boy-turned-man and wild creature stronger than ever. The hunters lingered at the edges, still awed, hesitant to move, but giving Oren this sacred moment. Oren knelt slightly, looking up into Shard's golden eyes. "I miss you, old friend," he said softly. "I never thought I'd see you again. I'm so happy to see you. You've gotten so big," he cooed as he ran his hands through the cat's thick fur. Shard lowered his massive head, nuzzling Oren gently. The rumble that came from deep in his chest was soft, almost like a sigh. He pawed at him lightly, nudged him playfully, and then, with a final, lingering look, turned and vanished back into the forest, powerful muscles carrying him into the shadows. Oren rose slowly, eyes lingering on where his childhood companion had disappeared. "I'll never forget you, Shard," he whispered after the massive cat was gone. The hunters followed him back through the forest, hearts still racing, but with awe and respect for the man who had stood before the Sabarak and been recognized, not as prey, but as friend. When they returned to the village, tales of Oren's courage spread quickly. Stories were told of the man who had faced the crone, survived, and commanded the respect of a creature of legend, the golden Sabarak. From that day forward, Oren was known among his people as Oren Sabarak Sa, friend of the Sabarak. The name carried reverence, a tale passed from generation to generation, honoring the bond between human and beast, courage and trust, and the extraordinary friendship that had transcended years, distance, and the wild itself. As Oren grew older, he would still often glance toward the distant forest. And somewhere, in the shadows and sunlight, he knew Shard still roamed, wild and free, carrying with him the memory of a boy who had once saved him, and a bond that would never be broken.